Existentialism, a feeling of estrangement, emptiness, and darkness. It is a frequent theme in movies, music, and books, in this case Francis Ford Coppola's Apocalypse Now Redux, Spectre by Radiohead, and Franz Kafka's The Metamorphosis, all of which may seem unrelated, but they depict similar themes of alienation and darkness. Alienation of the self. Apocalypse Now and Metamorphosis may seem completely unrelated, but taking a closer look, you come to realize Captain Willard and Gregor are not too dissimilar. In the beginning of both of their stories, it is made clear both have been changed from how they once were, Gregor into a literal insect, and Captain Willard into a man who has lost meaning in life outside the jungles of Vietnam, falling into substance abuse to cope. Additionally, Spectre tells the story of someone who feels lost and betrayed, with Tom York's ghostly and restrained vocals artfully portraying the disillusion of the self. Throughout Apocalypse Now, we see Captain Willard lose himself more and more the further upriver he leads, losing members of his team along the way and witnessing how the war has changed since he was there last. As Gregor's story progresses, he loses himself more through the family's treatment of Gregor, sinking more and more into the beast that he is. Beast. All three characters, Gregor, Willard, and the narrator of Spectre, go through a system of evasion through circumstances. It is not their fault, and they had nothing to do with it. But they also eventually stopped trying to find meaning. They stopped, and that is the final nail. It is the alienation and erasure of the self that brings them down. The collapse of agency. In the Metamorphosis, the collapse of Gregor's agency is the most literal and tragically understated, but it mirrors the physiological unraveling seen in Apocalypse Now and the emotional disintegration woven through Radiohead's Spectre. Gregor's transformation immediately robs him of bodily autonomy, yet his true loss of agency comes as his family slowly stops recognizing him, reducing him to something unworthy of care or voice. Similarly, in Apocalypse Now, Captain Willard undergoes a disillusion of identity the deeper he travels upriver, his mission becoming less of a choice and more of an inexorable force reshaping him. The further he moves into Kurtz's domain, the more Willard fades into a tool of the military machine, his individuality replaced with a brutal, almost predetermined role. Even Kurtz, who once possessed immense authority, became a symbol of total agency, collapsed. A man whose philosophical clarity cannot translate into meaningful action, leaving him trapped in his own constricted kingdom of madness. Radiohead's Spectre parallels these trajectories through mood and narrative. The speaker feels eclipsed by something larger and more powerful, a specter, that overwrites his sense of self. The song's slow, descending harmonic structures mimic the sinking feeling of losing control, as though identity is slipping through the cracks. Across all three works, the characters face forces of familial rejection, war, institutional power, emotional betrayal, that gradually hollow them out until each becomes a ghost of who they once were, undone not by a single moment, but the steady erosion of agency. Systems of malevolent force. In all three works, systems of power appear as indifferent or malevolent forces that overwhelm the individual. In Apocalypse Now, the U.S. military functions as an absurd, self-devouring machine. Its orders contradictory, its logic circular, its human cost immeasurable. Willard's journey upriver reveals a hierarchy that pretends to hold authority but actually dissolves into the chaos the closer he gets to Kurtz, exposing a system that consumes soldiers and returns them as hollowed-out remnants of themselves. Radiohead's Spectre, although written for a film steeped in espionage and surveillance, uses its imagery to gesture towards shadowy, omnipresent powers, whether political institutions, intelligence networks, or the internalized anxieties that manipulate from the background. The specter becomes a metaphor for unseen systems that exert control without accountability. The Metamorphosis presents its own quieter but equally suffocating machinery. Gregor's employer and family act as gears in an unforgiving capitalist structure that values him only for his ability to produce income. Once he becomes unable to work, the system discards him with cold efficiency. Across all three works, war, surveillance, and economic pressures operate with mechanical indifference, emphasizing how vast impersonal structures can erase human individuality before any physical or psychological transformations take place. Ultimately, Apocalypse Now, Spectre, and the Metamorphosis converge on a single haunting insight. When individuals confronted with overwhelming forces, war, societal expectations, surveillance, or emotional abandonment, the self becomes fragile, unstable, and susceptible to erasure. Each work portrays characters who begin their journeys already fractured and who are gradually stripped of identity, purpose, and agency by circumstances far beyond their control. Whether it is Willard drifting deeper into the moral vacuum of the Vietnam War, Gregor surrendering to the dehumanization imposed by his family and labor system, or the narrator of Spectre being shadowed and overwritten by an unseen power, all three depict the same existential darkness. They show how alienation is not merely a feeling, but a process, slow, relentless, and often invisible, through which the world reduces a person to something unrecognizable. In examining these stories together, we see that existentialism is not an abstract philosophical idea, but a lived experience, the struggle to hold on to oneself in a world that is indifferent, chaotic, or quietly hostile. And in each case, the struggle ends with not triumph, but with the chilling realization that the self can disappear long before the body does. This is Existentialism in Media.